My name is Sarah Bennett. I'm 39 years old. My daughter Ella is 10. She has straight dark hair she keeps in a low ponytail because she says high ponytails waste time in the morning, and she has a very specific way of sitting at her desk, both feet flat on the floor, back straight, pencil held at exactly the angle her second grade teacher taught her, that she has never once abandoned. She makes lists for everything. Grocery lists, book lists, lists of questions she wants to ask the dentist. She has a notebook she calls her thinking book, where she writes down things she doesn't understand yet, so she can come back to them later when she knows more. It is currently on its 3rd volume. She is the kind of child who reads the instructions before touching the box, the kind who checks her homework twice and then checks it again, not because she's anxious, but because she believes that most mistakes are preventable and prevention is simply a matter of paying attention. She once returned a library book 3 days early because she'd finished it and felt that holding on to it longer than necessary wasn't fair to the next person waiting. She has been waiting for the Meridian Academic Scholars Program since she was 7. That was when she first heard about it. Her older cousin Theo had made it in. Theo was the kind of kid adults used as an example. National Math Olympiad, early admission to every program, the type of effortless success that looks from the outside like it didn't cost anything. Ella watched him accept his certificate at the family dinner and afterward asked me 3 careful questions. What do you have to do to get in? How long does it take to prepare? Can I start now? She was 7. I told her she had time. She wrote it in the first page of the first thinking book anyway. Goal: Meridian Scholars. Timeline: 3 years. Resources needed: unknown, will research. I found the page 6 months ago, when all of this was already happening, and I sat with it for a long time. The Meridian Academic Scholars Program is the best academic enrichment program in our district. 30 spots per year, open to students in grades 4 through 6. A full-year intensive, real college-level content, taught by university adjuncts, covering everything from logic and rhetoric to applied mathematics to environmental science. Graduates of the program had gone on to state competitions, national recognition, early college admission. It had a wait list. It had an interview process. It had an application that took most families months to prepare. It cost nothing. It was publicly funded. It was supposed to be merit-based. Those last 3 words are the ones I want you to hold on to. Ella started preparing the summer before 4th grade. Not because I pushed her. I want to be precise about this, because it matters. She prepared because she'd decided to. She had a schedule written out on graph paper, divided into subjects with color coding. Math, yellow. Reading comprehension, blue. Writing, green. Critical thinking exercises from a workbook she'd found at the library book sale for 50 cents, orange. She worked for 45 minutes every morning before the day started. She kept a log. I asked her once, that summer, if she wanted to take a break. We were at the lake, a Saturday in August, and the water was flat and silver, and everyone was slow and easy, the way people get in August, and Ella was sitting cross-legged on the dock with her orange workbook. She looked up at me. I'll take a break after I get in, she said, and she went back to the workbook. I didn't say anything else about it. 3rd grade had given her an excellent foundation. Her teacher, Mrs. Carol, a small, precise woman who gave the same quality of attention to every student regardless of noise level or energy, which is rarer than it should be, had identified Ella early as a child who needed more than the standard curriculum. She gave Ella extra problems, extended reading lists. She told me at the spring conference that Ella had the kind of disciplined mind that schools sometimes failed to serve properly, and that I should absolutely pursue the Scholars Program. I already knew. Ella had told me 4 months earlier. The application opened in October of 4th grade. Ella had been ready since September. She submitted it the first day the portal opened. Her essays were 3 drafts each, refined over 2 weeks. Her teacher recommendations came from Mrs. Carroll and her art teacher, Mr. Diaz, who had written, I later found out, that Ella was the most methodical, creative thinker he'd encountered in 19 years of teaching. We waited. In November, an email came. Ella had been selected for the interview round. Top 40 applicants, 30 spots. She read the email twice, closed the laptop, sat very still for a moment. Then she opened the thinking book to a fresh page and wrote, Interview, December 14th. Topics to review, all of them. She reviewed all of them. The interview was 45 minutes. I sat in the waiting area outside the conference room and tried to read a magazine and failed completely. When Ella came out, she had the contained, careful expression she uses when she's decided not to get ahead of herself. How was it? I asked. Good, she said. I knew most of the answers. There was one question I wasn't sure about. I said I wasn't sure, but explained my reasoning. That's exactly the right thing to do. I know, she said. I just hoped they thought so. We drove home mostly in silence. She asked to stop for hot chocolate. I bought her the largest size. She held the cup in both hands and looked out the window and didn't say anything else about it. Results were due in January, the second week, a Friday. I know the exact time the email came in because I was standing at the kitchen counter when my phone buzzed and I looked down and saw the subject line, Meridian Academic Scholars Program, and my heart did something complicated before I even opened it. I read it 3 times before I called Ella in from the living room. Ella, I said, come here. She knew immediately from my voice. She came in from the doorway and looked at my face, and I watched her expression shift from neutral to something she was working very hard to control. Did I get in? Read it yourself, I said, and handed her the phone. She read it again, set the phone down on the counter very carefully. Then she pressed her lips together, and her chin did that wobbling thing it does when she's trying not to cry and not quite managing, and she said, in a voice that was trying to be steady and almost was, I got in. You got in, she cried then. Really cried. The kind she never lets herself do in front of other people. The kind that had been building for 3 years, and 2 summers, and 400 and something mornings, with the orange workbook on the dock. I held her, and she cried into my shoulder, and I didn't say a word. I just let it be as big as it was. After about 2 minutes, she pulled back and wiped her face with the sleeve of her sweatshirt. Okay, she said. Okay, what do we do now? We celebrate, I said. After that, we find out when it starts. She nodded. Went back to the living room. Came back 30 seconds later with the thinking book. She wrote, got in, January 11th. The program was supposed to start February 3rd. Orientation, then the first module. On January 28th, I got a phone call from the district enrichment coordinator. Her name was Mrs. Paulson. I had spoken to her twice before, once during the application process, and once after the acceptance letter came. She had seemed efficient both times. Professional. I had no reason not to trust her. She said there had been a placement adjustment. I said I didn't understand. She said the program had received some updated information and that unfortunately, Ella's placement was being reconsidered. I said I still didn't understand. She said there was a matter of scoring methodology and that some of the interview scores had been reviewed and that Ella's final ranking had changed. I said, to what? Silence. She said, 31. I said, the program has 30 spots. She said, yes. I held the phone and looked at the wall for a moment. Ella was at school. I had the house to myself. The kitchen was very quiet. I said, when was this decision made? She said, recently. I said, is this final? She said, at this time, yes. I said, I'd like a copy of the scoring documentation, please. She said she would check on that. I said I would follow up in writing. Then I ended the call and sat down at the kitchen table and opened a new note on my phone and wrote everything down. Time of call, 2:14 p.m. Name, Mrs. Paulson. Key phrases, placement adjustment, scoring methodology, updated information. Ranking changed to 31. I started a folder. I named it Meridian. I was not going to tell Ella that day. I needed more information before I could tell her anything at all, and I needed to know what I was dealing with before I decided how to deal with it. I made 2 calls that afternoon. The first was to Mrs. Carroll, who picked up on the second ring. I explained what had happened. Mrs. Carroll was silent for a moment. Then she said very carefully, "Do you know who got the 30 spot?" I said no. I hadn't thought to ask. She said, "I think you should find out." I said, "Do you know something?" She said, "I know what I've heard. I don't want to tell you something I can't verify. But I think you should find out." The second call was to another mother in our school, a woman named Deborah, whose son Marcus had gone through the program 2 years earlier. I knew her from school events. She was straightforward, and she knew everyone. I explained what had happened without using Ella's name at first. Then I used it. Deborah was quiet. Then she said, "Rachel, I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to know I'm telling you because I think it's right, not because I want to cause problems." I told her to tell me. She told me. The 30 spot, Ella's spot, had been given to a child named Carter Whitfield. Carter was the son of a man named Douglas Whitfield. Douglas Whitfield had donated $240,000 to the district's Academic Enrichment Foundation the previous spring. His name was on the new science wing at the middle school. He served on the foundation's advisory board. Carter Whitfield had ranked 34 in the interview process. I wrote all of that down. Then I opened my laptop and I started researching. The Meridian program was publicly funded, state and district money, supplemented by the foundation. The foundation was a 501c3 with publicly available filings. The program selection process was governed by a district policy document I found on the district website after 23 minutes of searching. The policy was explicit. Selection was based solely on application scores and interview performance, weighted equally. No other factors were permitted. I read that sentence 4 times. No other factors were permitted. I printed it, highlighted it, added it to the folder. The next morning, I requested, in writing, the following documents: Ella's full application score, her interview score, her final composite ranking, the names and rankings of all 30 students selected, and the name and ranking of any student who had been added to the program after the initial selection was complete. I sent the request to Mrs. Paulson, the district enrichment coordinator, and the district superintendent. I gave them 5 business days. I also sent an email to Mrs. Carroll, which I copied to the principal, thanking her for her excellent recommendation and mentioning that I was in the process of reviewing the selection documentation. I did not mention Douglas Whitfield, not yet. Ella came home that day and ate a snack and did her homework and told me about something that had happened at lunch. She didn't know anything was wrong. I had become very good at keeping my face neutral. That night, after she was asleep, I found the district's parent complaint protocol, 3 levels: internal review first, then district ombudsman, then the state education oversight office. I read all 3. I took notes. I added them to the folder. Day 6. No response from Mrs. Paulson. I sent a follow-up. Polite, clear. Referenced my original request. Added a note that I had reviewed the program's selection policy and was seeking clarification on how the policy had been applied in this case. Day 8. A response. Mrs. Paulson said the scoring documentation was proprietary to the review process and not subject to public records requests. I forwarded her response to a friend of mine who is a parent advocate, a woman named Liz, who had spent 12 years helping families navigate school district disputes, not a lawyer, but thorough and steady and unbothered by bureaucratic language. Liz read it and called me back in 10 minutes. She said, "That's incorrect. Application scores are not proprietary. They're educational records under FERPA. You have a right to Ella's scores. And if you're alleging discrimination in a publicly funded program, you have additional protections." She said, "File a formal complaint. Do it in writing. Send it to the superintendent and CC the state." She helped me draft it that night. The complaint was 6 pages. It laid out the timeline: acceptance letter, phone call, placement adjustment, request for documentation, non-response. It cited the selection policy. It noted, carefully and with appropriate framing, that I had received credible information suggesting that the student placed above Ella in the final selection had ranked lower in the scored process, and that the family of that student had made a significant financial contribution to the foundation that funded the program. I did not accuse anyone of anything directly. I asked questions, specific documented questions. I included Ella's full application, Mrs. Carroll's recommendation, Mr. Diaz's recommendation, the email confirming Ella's original acceptance, the call log from Mrs. Paulson, the program policy document with the highlighted sentence. I sent it on a Thursday morning. Friday afternoon, I got a call from the district superintendent's office. Not from the superintendent, from her deputy. He said the complaint was being taken seriously. He said an internal review had been initiated. He said I should expect to hear back within 10 business days. I said, "Thank you." I wrote down his name, the time, and every word he said. I told Ella that evening. I had been waiting until I had something concrete to tell her. I sat across from her at the kitchen table, and I told her, as clearly and calmly as I could, what had happened, that she had earned her spot, that someone had made a decision that wasn't fair, that I was working on it. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. She looked at her hands. "So they just gave it to someone else?" she said. "That's what I believe happened. I'm trying to verify it." "Why?" I looked at her. "Because his family gave money," I said. I wasn't going to soften it. She was 10 and she was careful, and she deserved the real answer. She processed that. "That's not the rule," she said. "No," I said. "It's not. The rule is the scores." "Yes." "And I scored higher?" "I believe so. I'm trying to get the documentation to confirm it." She nodded slowly. The thinking book was open in front of her. She hadn't been writing in it while I was talking, which meant she'd been paying very careful attention. She picked up her pen. "What do you need from me?" she said. "Nothing. You don't need to do anything." "I can write down everything I remember from the interview," she said, "in case it's useful." I looked at my daughter, 10 years old, offering to document her own interview from memory in case it helped the case. "That would be useful," I said. "Yes." She wrote for 40 minutes, 7 pages of the thinking book. Every question she'd been asked, her answers, the order of the interview, the names on the interviewers' name cards. She remembered 4 of the 5 names. She drew a diagram of the seating arrangement. I added it to the folder. 12 business days later, 2 past their stated deadline, I received a letter from the superintendent's office. The internal review had found procedural irregularities in the final placement process. The documentation for the ranking adjustment had been incomplete. The district was committed to ensuring equitable access to all enrichment programs. Ella was being offered a spot in the program. Not the 31st spot. The program was expanding by 2 additional spots this cycle, effective immediately. I read it twice. Then I called Liz. She said, "That's a win." Not a full win. They didn't admit what happened, but they fixed it. That's what matters. I said, "Carter Whitfield is still in the program." She said, "Yes, but so is Ella." I sat with that for a while. Then I said, What about next year? And the year after? She said, that's a different battle. You can fight it, but you have to decide if this one is done first. I thought about Ella's 7 pages of interview notes, the thinking book on its 3rd volume. 3 summers of orange workbooks. I said, for now, this one is done. I told Ella that night. She was in her room, at her desk, both feet flat on the floor, pencil at the correct angle, working on something from school. I told her she was in. She put the pencil down. She turned around. For real? For real. They're expanding the program. She turned back to her desk, picked up the pencil. Okay, she said. I waited. Ella, you got in. Again, you can be happy about it. She was quiet for a moment. Then she turned back around, and for just a second, 1 second, I saw it. The thing she'd been holding in since January 28th. The weight of it. I shouldn't have had to fight for something I already earned, she said. No, I said. You shouldn't have. But I did, and we won. Yes. She turned back to her desk. Okay, she said again, quieter this time, like it was settling. The program started March 1st, 6 weeks late. Ella walked in on the first day with her thinking book in her bag and both feet flat on the floor and her pencil at the correct angle, and she sat down in a room full of the 31 most academically motivated kids in the district, and she did not look like someone who had almost been left out. She looked like someone who had always been supposed to be there, because she was. At the end of the first module, she came home and opened the thinking book to a new page. She wrote, Module 1 complete, notes, attached. Then below that, in smaller letters, she wrote something she hadn't written in any of the other volumes. She wrote, worth it. I found it later, when she was asleep. I stood in the hallway outside her room with the notebook in my hands, and I thought about a 7-year-old sitting at a dinner table watching her cousin accept a certificate and asking 3 careful questions. What do you have to do to get in? How long does it take? Can I start now? She started then, and she finished. And no one, not a phone call from a coordinator, not a placement adjustment, not $240,000 with someone else's name on it, was going to take that from her. I added one last note to the Meridian folder before I archived it. I wrote, resolved. Keep the file. I'm keeping the file. If this story stayed with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to. Drop your location in the comments. USA, UK, Canada, Australia, wherever you're watching from. I read every single one. And tell me, did I go too far or not far enough? See you in the next one.